Welcome back to part two of our interview with Bill Federer. He's the best-selling author of a wide variety of novels, including There Really Is a Santa Claus. And Bill, in our previous interview, we were discussing the rich history of Christmas, the truth about who St. Nicholas is. But now I want to get into with you the symbology of Christmas itself and the traditions that we hold dear in this nation, the Christmas tree and the wreath and the Yule log and the lights. But before we get to that, is there, in the way that Santa Claus is portrayed to children today, does it differ much than when children grew up with Santa in the 1900s?
Yes, and if you want, I can share that real quick. Well, it might take a few minutes. We talked about Martin Luther in the previous program and how he moved all the gift giving to December 25th. Matter of fact, Martin Luther is the one that was walking home one night and saw the stars twinkling and decided to put a tree in his house and little candles in the branches and told his children, this is like the sky above Bethlehem on the night of Christ's birth. Now, the lights at this time of year, the first reference to those is Hanukkah. In 165 BC, when the Jews under the Maccabees drove out the Syrians who had trashed the temple, and they cleaned out the temple, and they only had enough oil for one day, and it miraculously stays lit for 8 days. And so, matter of fact, Jesus celebrated Hanukkah. It says he was in Jerusalem for the Feast of Dedication. Anyway, but the tree is interesting. In Germany, they had these Germanic tribes that had overrun the country, and they were the Roman borders, and the Germanic tribes worshipped Thor. That's where we get the word Thor's Day. They worshipped another god, Woden, and that's where we get the word Wednesday, and Frigid, which is where we get the word Friday. Anyway, these Germanic tribes believed that Thor lived in an oak tree in Geismar, Germany, and they were about to sacrifice little Prince Alsoph. But around 716 AD, St. Boniface, a missionary, shows up. He's sometimes called Winfred, and he takes an axe and he begins to chop down the oak tree. And some people say, well, stop him. And others said, well, wait a second. If Thor is really a god, he can protect his own oak tree. Sure enough, they chopped the tree down. This is when the Germans become Christians. And St. Boniface turned to a evergreen and said, let this be the tree of the Christ child. See how it points toward heaven. Its leaves are evergreen like everlasting light. And let it shelter no deeds of blood, but deeds of peace, because your homes are built of fir. And so the Germans liked the tree, but it was Martin Luther that put the candles in the tree. But we're going to look at England. England is unique. Henry VIII.
What about so the reference of the tree being put in people's houses is not the origins are not pagan?
Well, no, the pagans did worship trees. But it was Martin Luther that took the cedar tree, the evergreen tree, and put it in his house with little candles in the branches and told his children, this is like the sky above Bethlehem on the night of Christ's birth.
Well, I believe there's a scripture that states, do not do as the pagans do by cutting down a tree, bringing it into your home and decorating it. It seems like there's a contrast there. Yeah,
well, I mean, the pagans did worship trees, but Martin Luther's case, it was just, to tell his kids about the sky above Bethlehem. You see lots of different things. Matter of fact, in England, we see some of this pagan syncretism. Henry VIII brought the Reformation to England, not because he had any religious experience. He just wanted another wife, wanted a male heir to the throne. He ended up having 6 wives, and divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Matter of fact, there was a group so Henry VIII decides to make himself the head of the Church of England. And there was a group that decided they wanted to purify this Church of England, so they were nicknamed the Puritans. But Henry VIII brought back, instead of focusing everything on the Christ child, Henry VIII ended Saints' Days, but he brought back an old Roman holiday, because Britain used to be a Roman colony. And the Romans celebrated Saturnalia at the end of the year. Saturn was their god of feasting and plenty and merriment. And so if you've ever seen The Christmas Carol with Charles Dickens, and you see the spirit of Christmas present, and it's this big fat guy with green robes, a wreath in his hair, goblet of wine, and grapes all around, and you're looking at him and asking yourself, who is this guy? He sort of looks like Santa Claus, but he also sort of looks like a Roman god. Well, that was Saturn, but they Christianized him and called him Father Christmas. They could not call him St. Nicholas because saints were outlawed now in England. And so during this time, Christmas in England became sort of a party time, sort of like a Mardi Gras. And you think, Mardi Gras? Well, Mardi Gras was actually the day before Lent, when you would fast 40 days before Easter. And now it's this lewd party in New Orleans. Well, under Henry VIII's time, Christmas in England became sort of a carousing, drinking, partying, wassailing, where they'd take a drink of booze and throw the rest of it on a plant, hoping for a nice harvest the next year. And so the Puritans in England fought this, and they would write things saying, can the Son of God be honored by hard drinking and mad mirth and a partying fit for a Bacchus or a Mohammedan Ramadan? You know, certainly the King of heaven cannot be honored by. And so we see a little conflict here. Now, the Puritans settled Massachusetts, and they actually had a 5-shilling fine in Massachusetts for anyone caught celebrating Christmas. They said the Sabbath is the holy day. All the other days are the same. The Pilgrims, they came over, and they, you read the journal of the captain of the Mayflower, and he said, at harbor in Plymouth, Christmas Day, but not observed by these colonists, they being opposed to All Saints' days, etc. A large party went ashore to fell timber and build their first building. Matter of fact, an interesting story in William Bradford's History of the Plymouth Settlement. He said that a second boatload of pilgrims came over, and they wanted to celebrate Christmas. And he said, being that we were a group that is not into forcing the conscience, I let them. And he said that they came back. So William Bradford and the rest went to the fields and came back at lunchtime from working and saw them playing stickball in the street and all kinds of games. And William Bradford said, it may offend your conscience to work on Christmas, but it offends my conscience that you're working, or we're working while you're playing. So if you're going to observe it, do it quietly in your home. But it was the Dutch that loved Christmas that brought the Christmas traditions to America, to New Amsterdam. And the Dutch, they really liked St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas was considered the patron saint of sailors, and the Dutch sailed around the world. Matter of fact, the very boat that the pilgrims, the settlers to New Amsterdam came across on was named St. Nicholas. They had not a mermaid or a Poseidon on the front of the boat. They had a Nicholas. And so the first church in New Amsterdam was St. Nicholas Dutch Reformed Church. And it continued and moved locations several times. They finally built this huge cathedral. The big stone, massive cathedral is the largest church in New York, and it was at 48th and 5th Street. But as the Manhattan Island part became more of a business district and people moving out, the church elders sold the building to an oil company who tore it down, and they built an oil building there. But the Dutch really liked St. Nicholas. Matter of fact, it's interesting, the biblical themes that originated this were that Jesus would return at the end of the world to judge the living and the dead, riding a white horse. And the saints would come back with him riding white horses. And St. Nicholas is a saint, and he certainly would be one of the saints coming back riding a white horse. The Greeks just have him coming back once a year for a little mini judgment, a little mini checkup, right? And so sort of like in the West, we hear the stories of, oh, St. Peter's at the gates of heaven. Well, the Greek Orthodox said, well, St. Nicholas gets to come back for a little mini judgment every year. And in Norway, they didn't have horses, so he's coming back on a reindeer. And then there's the Lamb's Book of Life. If your name's in there, you go to heaven. Then there's the books of works, and that turns into the book of the naughty and the nice. And the angels turn into the elves. And the saints come from where? The heaven, the New Jerusalem, the celestial city. Well, that turns into the North Pole. And so you can see these biblical themes sort of, being morphed over the years. But in Holland, even to this day, St. Nicholas comes once a year riding a white horse. And he comes from Spain. And he has with him a little Moorish costumed helper, Zwarte Piet. In some countries, he's called Krampus or Ruprecht, but
let's talk about this character, Ruprecht or Krampus, because he's strangely absent from the American version of Christmas. Who is Ruprecht? Who is Krampus? What was his role, and why was he excluded in the American version of Christmas?
Yeah, very good question. Well, in Holland, their name for this Krampus or Ruprecht was Zwarte Piet, Black Peter. And he was a Moor and a Muslim, right? And he came from Spain with Santa Claus, St. Nicholas. And the Muslims in Spain had slavery for centuries. They enslaved over 1.5 million Europeans. There were entire Catholic orders in Europe during the Middle Ages called the Mathurians and the Trinitarians. The head of the order was called the ransomer, and they would collect alms and donations across Europe and go under a white flag to North Africa to get your friend back who was sold into Muslim slavery. Miguel de Cervantes, the author of Don Quixote, was ransomed back by the Trinitarian order back to Spain. Anyway, so the story in Holland is that if you're good, St. Nicholas will come and give you presents. And the idea of throwing the coins or the money or the presents in the window or down the fireplace, that goes back to the St. Nicholas throwing the bags of gold in to help that family. But they tell the little children that if you're naughty, Zwarte Piet will put you in a gunny sack and take you back to Spain and sell you into Muslim slavery. And so often when you tell a little boy that Santa's coming, the little boy would start crying because he thought it might be his last night on earth. And I was doing a radio interview one time and someone called in and they said, oh, yes, in Holland, every year when we were little, the boys would go to sleep with a pocket knife in their pocket. And I said, why is that? He goes, that's to cut ourselves out of the gunny sack in case Zwarte Piet took us. So anyway, fascinating, a little bit cruel, but you can imagine, teasing the little, obnoxious little boys saying, if you don't be good, you're going to, this will be your last night with the family. But anyway.
Bill, we're up against a break. When we come back, I want to discuss a couple more of the images of Christmas, the wreath and the Yule log as well, even mistletoe and other imagery. But we got to take this break. We'll be right back. We're talking with Bill Federer right here on WHDT World News.